Hi everyone, I'm Heath Hightower, co-host of Process Recordings. Before we get started with today's show, I want to just give you a quick reminder. While Lisa and I hope you find our show useful, we also want you to know that it's not a substitute for therapy. If you do need a therapist, however, we do recommend that you check out the psychologytoday.com website. Also, if you need immediate support, contact 988, which is the 3-digit number to contact the National Crisis Hotline and Suicide number. Thanks for listening and watching, and enjoy the show. Hi everyone, I'm Heath Hightower.
And I'm Lisa Wessan.
And welcome to Process Recordings, the place where we have real talk about real human experiences and solutions for better living, loving, learning, and working. Welcome to today's show. I'm here with Lisa Wessan, and today we are going to be talking about beginnings. One of the things that Lisa and I want to share with you, the audience, is that Lisa and I actually don't know each other very well at all, and yet we've decided to do a podcast together. So we thought we would take this opportunity to introduce ourselves and interview each other about this particular show and what we're going to do with it. And I thought we would just get started by me asking Lisa this question: Why a show now?
So, I've been listening to podcasts for years, Heath. So I've been a fan of the podcasting world, and I love the sharing of information and the great book lists and the footnotes and all the stuff. You know, I love Tim Ferriss and all his stuff. Anyway, and I have, at this point in my life, you know, I read a lot, and I'd like to interview you, of course, and you and I will share ideas, but being able to have authors on here and explore deeper into more topics that I've been studying excites me, and sharing that knowledge with our viewers, you know, who may not be able to have the luxury of reading as much books as you and I read, you know, and being able to convey complex concepts on easier terms where they can practical application. I love being practical and tactical. And so conveying that information is like my jam. It's what I do in my practice. I'm a solution-focused therapist. You know, I like to teach people skills. I like to teach people methods, techniques, tips. That's what I'm about. So, and I love to share it. I'm a natural promoter when it comes to stuff. I love to share, almost to a fault. You know, I have to be careful I don't push it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I love sharing good information.
And what are you looking forward to most sharing with audiences?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you know, you and I both work with some difficult populations. You know, in my dialectical behavior therapy groups, we have lots of people who are borderline and bipolar, suicidal. You have a lot of experience. You're a suicide expert. And I love to say there are solutions, that people some have the worst mental situation. You can still turn that around, you know? And I get excited to help people turn that stuff around. And obviously this show is not your solution. You've got to see a therapist. You may need a psychiatrist. You might need some meds. You might need some, transcranial magnetic therapy. Who knows? But, you know what I'm saying? It's like, this is part of the solution. And I know from podcasts I've listened to, I love when I am touched, moved, and inspired, and I grow, and I get excited, and I change my life, and I do things differently. I mean, my goodness. I mean, certain podcasts have really transformed me, you know? So I want to be part of that transformation wave.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we decided that the first topic was going to be beginnings is that it's a very common experience for people to have beginnings. Some beginnings are chosen beginnings, like starting a family. Some are surprises, like a traumatic grief or a loss. And so as we're thinking about beginnings together, I'm wondering if there are things that you and I should talk through as we're trying to develop an understanding and rapport with each other, as well as with our audience.
You're talking about focusing on a couple of topics or threads that we'll be revisiting more frequently than others?
Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind that that I think most people don't talk about at the beginning, but probably should, is I am a male, cisgendered male, and I understand that you are cisgender female. There's gender dynamics that likely exist between the two of us. And I'm wondering, would it be interesting or helpful to talk about that and like how we might manage that as two people who are different gendered and different sexed?
Well, interesting you say that, because I agree with what you're saying, that we are definitely male and female. However, I've come to understand that I am definitely, and I think you are too, you may or may not agree with me, that we're multidimensional beings, and I contain multitudes.
Sure.
In me, there are all kinds of different entities that have different genders and different, I don't know if it's past life, I don't know where it comes from, but I have identifications with many different types of people. That's why in my practice, I'm very comfortable working with people who are going through trans process or coming out, whatever, their gay thing, whatever. Like I feel like my soul has been through so many things already. Not even in this life, frankly, because I have not been anything but female straight in this life. However, I contain multitudes. And so, I don't know. Like, I'm presenting as Lisa Wessan, female, but I feel like I'm much more than that, and that's how I feel.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
it's non-binary.
Yeah, definitely it's non-binary. So I am wondering, though, since it sounds like for you, gender doesn't feel like an issue that we need to talk about, I think one of the issues that all people encounter in all relationships, especially at the beginning, might be conflict, right? So one of the things that I've been thinking about is, you and I are two smart people. We are likely going to have disagreements about what do we do with the show, what topics do we cover, what topics don't we cover. And I'm just wondering, as you think about beginning a relationship with someone you don't know, what are some things that would be helpful for me to know about your conflict style, if and when a conflict arises? Because I don't want to step in a landmine that I don't have to step in.
Interesting question. Wow. Well, it's been so harmonious so far. I mean, I'll just tell you guys, we met at a workshop on how to do podcasting. The first hour was a PowerPoint, and we learned all this history. The second hour, we were in a laboratory testing the equipment, and we were practicing together.
Right, exactly.
And I said to Heath, "You have an amazing voice. You're great." And that's what I just said it with no intention, just that he does. And then we had fun at that day at that workshop, February 28th, 2024. It was a 2-hour program, 2 CUs. And then, when you sent me that email, hey, you want to do a podcast? I thought, how fun. What a great idea. So to me, and right from the beginning, it's been very relaxing, very flowy. And I think I do have favorite topics. I mean, I'm interested in nutrition and psychiatry. I do a lot of reading and research. In a previous career, I was a science reporter, and I'm no longer doing that full time, but I'm still a science reporter. I'm still checking things out. So I love that information. And I'm also interested in people that have chemical imbalance. I'm not against meds, but I'm always interested in what else can they do besides the medication? So of course, the yoga, the breath work, that whole list of 25 things you can do if they're willing to do it and avoid medication. Great. But anyway, so those are some of my pet topics that I research. And then also dealing with trauma, and you're a trauma expert. That's a big topic. I'm interested in that also. So although, how we on this show, I don't think we're going to, in our 25-minute segments, we're not going to have time to go into deep trauma analysis. Maybe we will, I don't know. But there's certain things I know for myself, personally and professionally. I'm always interested in when people get triggered. That's the key point. Can they pause? Can they take a moment before they go nuclear and do their thing, whatever it is, booze, alcohol, weed, screaming, whatever they're going to do, porn, whatever. When people get triggered, how can they take that moment and regroup and not react? And that's, I'm very interested in that personally and professionally. So, and also, I'll say, I can say comfortably because I'm not ashamed of it, I'm not proud of it, but I'm a recovering food medicator. That used to be my drug of choice. I don't do it anymore. I mean, through that whole pandemic. Have you guys heard the expression during the pandemic, people became either a chunk, a drunk, or a hunk? So I went for the hunk, Right. I started weightlifting. I dropped a lot of weight, But I'm just saying, I'm interested in how people self-soothe without using food, alcohol, booze, porn, shopping, whatever. Very interested in that. So those are probably my hot topics.
Okay. All right.
And I'm sure you have I'm curious about your hot topics.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So I would say that a couple of things interest me about the opportunity to work with you. I think one of the things that I'm interested in is I think you and I practice very differently in terms of being clinical social workers. What you may need to know, audience, is that between the two of us, Lisa and I have 52 years of experience combined. So we're hoping to bring that to you through our conversations with each other about a range of topics to help you live better, work better, love better, and learn better.
That's right.
So
52 years.
I know, 52 years
impressive.
is a lot of time. And so I think that's why I feel like I'm ready to do a show, is I feel like I have lots of both professional and personal experience to draw from with very concrete lessons, both professional and personal, to share with other people. And I think about lessons that I have to share as descriptive in nature, not prescriptive. So my goal is not to tell people how to live. My goal is to say, based on the experiences I've had, both professional and personal, here are some things that helped me, helped other people, and may help you too. For me, it's really about building people's toolboxes, if you will, right?
I agree.
Whether that be an emotional toolbox, whether it be an intellectual toolbox, whether it be a very concrete behavioral toolbox, those are the kinds of things that I think I'm interested in. I also think that I think human beings learn best in dialogue. I think we're social creatures by nature, and a show like ours is very intentionally social. It's got two people who come from very different backgrounds and different areas of professional and personal expertise. And the dialogue between the two of us is likely to generate bigger and better ideas than either one of us could come up with just by ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I'm mostly interested in, is what happens in the synergy between the two of us. Because I actually believe that the most underutilized resource that people have is other human beings in their life. Most of us have been through really awful things, but most of us don't talk about the really awful things with other people because we're ashamed, we're embarrassed. But those very things that we're ashamed and embarrassed about are the very things that could help somebody else who's feeling exactly the same way. And human beings thrive when we feel connected and a part of, when we feel like we belong, when we feel like our experience isn't freakishly unique.
Yes.
And we feel bad when we feel disconnected, isolated, alone, alienated. And so that's what I'm hoping that we do with the show. I'm hoping that we, through dialogue between ourselves and perhaps guests, generate a suite of tools that people can apply in their everyday lives. We're going to have real conversations. We're not going to have big theoretical conversations. We're going to have real conversations about real people's lived experiences and real solutions that, based on our experiences, can actually be helpful to people, right? So I think that's what I'm mostly interested in.
Well, I'm in 100% alignment with that. I have no conflict. And for me also, there are internal processors and external processors. Right. Well, I'm an external processor.
Yeah.
So that means, for those of you who don't know, like I talk out loud to figure things out. Whereas the internal processor goes in their mind and they figure it all out and then they come out.
And that would be me.
Yeah.
I'm the internal processor.
So I hope I don't get on your nerves.
Nope, that's okay.
But when I'm thinking out loud, though, I often generate some interesting possibilities and options and ideas. And I sort through for myself and when I'm working with people, whatever. And on the show, we'll be able to maybe have a clinical case that, maybe it might be interesting if one of us has a clinical case that's challenging, like to bring it here and I'll ask your opinion. What do you think? Like maybe like peer supervision kind of thing. Just problem solving is interesting. Sure. And also I agree with you that when we share about these, I start to call some of this stuff the shiny versus the grimy, but like some of the dark stuff, it's very validating, and it also it's shame busting. Shame. The toxic shame spiral is just one of the worst things about people's trauma and pain. Yeah. And when we can validate and normalize it, how beautiful is that? When we realize everyone on this planet is failing forward. I mean, I have to tell you, as an example, footnoting, last year I read both of Michelle Obama's memoirs. That woman, she has such an amazing background. Besides the fact she went to Princeton undergraduate, Harvard, married Obama, first lady, forget that. She has a million projects going on, and she often feels she's not doing enough, and she feels ashamed that she's lazy. I mean, what the hell? When I read this book, I said, "Oh my God, if she feels this way, we all are in the same boat." Because Michelle Obama, I mean, like, I strive to have arms like her. Like, I'd love to get those muscles going. But meanwhile, she inspires the hell out of me, and she feels sometimes that she's not enough. And that tells me that is the human condition. That normalizes for me the days when I feel like, oh, I wish I did this, that, and the other. I wish I should have called this person back. I didn't call them. But that's why I always tell people, come join my club. Fail forward with me. We cannot get it all done perfectly every day. Right. And there's no shame in that game. There's no shame in that game. And I do the best I can. And also in the traumas and all the trauma work, there's no shame in when someone was assaulted or raped or shamed for who they are, their identity crisis. We have to take the shame out of that. That's like the human condition. And we're all working through something. No one escapes this. Right. No one escapes this.
Yeah, and I think that really gets to the title of the show, Process Recording, yes. Which is really about understanding how you're doing things, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. Yes. Right? That's ultimately what a process recording is. The things we did in school, which were called process recordings, were really about helping us understand as emerging clinicians, understanding what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it, so that we can be more empowered and more intentional about how we're working with clients. And what we want to do, I think, with the show is we want everybody to have that experience, to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and how they can be doing it better so that they can have a better possible life.
Well, you're reminding me, I love that. You're reminding me in my office, when I used to have an office before the pandemic, now I'm all virtual. I used to have a whiteboard, and I'd always write for the DBT group, this arc. Picture a blue arc, and on the bottom it says awareness, and the middle says acceptance, and then the bottom is action. And I tell people that's the flow of the therapeutic process here: awareness, acceptance, action. First, we have to become aware. Like the process recording helps you understand the motivation, the thoughts, the references, the countertransference, all this stuff. But awareness leads to the acceptance. Okay, that's where I'm at right now. That's who I am. That's what I did. Right. And the action is we change. We change. And it keeps cycling. We keep having the awareness, acceptance, and then action. And then we realize one day, oh my God, I'm doing things so differently now than I did like 10 years ago. But that's how I see it. But you have to start with the awareness. And this process recordings, for those of you who don't know, in graduate school, that's like, it was the burden of my life. Constantly writing for every patient you see, you have to write these reports, 3 columns, like intense. It was intense. But anyway, that's how you get to do the work, to understand what the awarenesses are for me, for them, for the process,
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and ultimately, we're trying to mirror that process here, right?
Yes, that would be good.
I think one of the things that most people don't know about being a quote-unquote expert is that experts know what they know, and they know what they don't know. And one of the things that I'm always really humbled by is when people call me an expert in something, I always kind of blush a little bit because there is a part of me that knows that my expertise is actually pretty narrow, like most experts.
Right. It's humbling.
It is humbling. And so when I heard you describe me as an expert in suicide and in trauma, there are pieces of that I certainly have spent a lot of time doing my own independent research, doing lots of reading about, and certainly working with clinically. And yet something like suicide is so complex. I am not an expert in every facet of that. Same thing with trauma. Trauma is an incredibly complex human experience for which I may have just a sliver of expertise in. And so I think one of the things that we also have talked about wanting to bring to the show is, yes, we know things, and we'll be really clear about what we don't know. And I think kind of having a show that is, on the one hand, filled with lots of wisdom and knowledge, we also have to be humble enough to know what we don't know. And we'll be really clear with you about that when those moments arise.
Well, that's the thing, too, that's often humbling. We have a wheelhouse here. That's our clinical social work wheelhouse. And then there's also other wheelhouses we might have gotten involved in.
Sure.
But then, like, I know that I don't know. I'd like to know more about biochemistry sometimes and how brain chemistry works. But I'm not a doctor, so I don't prescribe medication, And it's humbling, but I do like to learn about that stuff, And also with trauma, I mean, I have to say, Bessel van der Kolk and some other people I've studied with have shown me that there's a world of alternative options out there.
Right.
And he's a psychiatrist. He gives meds, but he prescribes yoga and biofeedback to almost all his patients because it's so powerful.
Right.
So when I read his book, I forget the name of it.
The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes, The Body Keeps the Score. Thank you. I read that last year. He has a whole section on biofeedback, and I'm thinking like, I should get involved in that. Like I don't do that. That'd be good to learn how. You can do that. You can take a training.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. That's like an interesting tool, and it's humbling. I mean, honestly, I'm a student and a teacher. But I feel like I'm always a student. There's lots to learn. It's infinite. It's an infinite number of things. But it's exciting, and we make a dent. I know it makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there some other pieces to our beginning that you feel like would be important for us to kind of talk through as a way to model beginnings for our audience?
With the now, since we just met in February, and then we just had a couple of emails and a couple of phone calls. We had a Panera, we met at one Panera for 1 hour, whatever. Yeah. But I love that you travel. I know you and your husband went to Europe, and I love that you're a traveler person, because I love to travel also. Yeah. And I think traveling changes your brain, too. There's a lot of things that happen when you travel. So I think it'd be fun if we talk about our travels vis-a-vis personal growth, and also and tough things happen overseas sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
I've had traumas overseas. I lived in Israel for a year, and a bomb went off at a bus stop I was at. Been through that. So there's a lot of things that happen when you travel that are bizarre, and but that's part of life. But I find it fascinating how people recover from trauma when they're traveling.
The other thing that I'm thinking about as we're thinking about the importance of beginnings is that beginnings are themselves a process. They're not an endpoint.
No.
And so I suspect we'll have iterative conversations about our beginnings, because every new show we do will be a new beginning of some sort, because we won't have done it together before. So while we're starting today's show by talking about our beginnings, it's important to realize that, like any human experience, it's iterative. Like you'll be going back to the beginnings over and over again. Yeah,
and we'll find out which topics we both like and some topics you may not want to deal with. Anyway, we'll find that out. That's going to be an interesting process of discovery in terms of booking guests.
Sure.
I'm interested in longevity also. And there's some people in Boston who would love to have guests on here. David Sinclair at Harvard, the geneticist. I don't know if he'll come up here, but I think there's a way we can do this with FaceTime or Zoom. Yeah. We can have some people zooming into our show, Hallowell, the ADHD expert. I mean, I don't know how you feel about ADHD. So there's certain topics I'm interested in always, to see what those guests would offer.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that an important rule I have in most of my relationships is always look for a way to say yes to some part of what's being requested. So even if I'm not interested in something, I would encourage you to do it. And I might not have to be a part of that particular show if that's not something that particularly interests me. So for me, I'll always be looking for ways to say yes to you as opposed to no. Because I've learned that that's effective in my relationships, both with my husband as well as in my personal relationships, always looking for ways to say yes. So
it just occurred to me, maybe we should make a list of, I don't know, our top 10 favorite authors in psychology or something, and to see the list, and then we can maybe pool that and decide mutually beneficial to have certain topics on the show.
Yeah. Because I think beginnings are so important, I think one of the things that we'll be doing in our next show is talking about very specific beginnings that have been really impactful in our lives. And hopefully those examples will resonate with you, our audience, and we'll also spend some time making sure that we're talking about very specific life lessons and skills that we learned from those beginnings. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Lisa, for our inaugural show. And please join us again next time on Process Recordings.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
And I want to thank Heath and your audience for watching with us. And may we all learn to turn our defeats into victories and our scars into stars and move forward with more joy in the journey.
Process Recordings is produced by Lisa Wessan and Heath Hightower, with technical support from Chelmsford TeleMedia, the community media center of Chelmsford, Massachusetts.